Greetings. I am Legacy Moon, and this is True Crime and Mysteries. Welcome back, current subscribers, the not subscribed, new subscribers, and those of you who are here for the very first time. Welcome. Now, for today's story, I have something that is a tad bit unusual, and even though we can't exactly say who's at fault here, we can very well say that a crime has certainly been committed. We are going to begin this story with a man by the name of Dexter Wade. On March the 14th, 2023, Dexter Wade was reported missing by his mother, Mrs. Betterston. Now, Mrs. Betterston, in addition to reporting him missing, she also emailed multiple pictures to the police so that they will know what her son looks like and, be out on the lookout for him. She did all of the things that one does when they can't find a member of their family. Now, what she wanted the police to go to the media and show his picture so that perhaps anyone could identify him and say, well, yes, I saw him here or I saw them there, just anything. But of course, the police did absolutely nothing. Now, let me tell you a little something about Miss Betterston. In 2019, her brother was unalived by police officers when he was 62 years old. Now, what happened in that case is her brother was, it's my understanding, a store parking lot. And I guess the officer felt like he was trespassing, but nevertheless, the police officer ended up slamming this 62-year-old man on the ground, which caused him to become unalive. Now, the police officer was later convicted of manslaughter. However, at the present time, he is appealing his conviction. So needless to say, Miss Betterston had a mistrust of the police, but she found that her son missing was, I guess you could say, more pressing. That's a poor choice of words, but, she outweighed that, what the police had done to her brother versus her son is missing. No one seems to know where he is at. Now let's go ahead and fast forward to August of 2023. A new investigator was assigned to Dexter Wade's case, and it was then that the family was finally notified that he was deceased. Now, once she found out that her son was deceased, it took another 2 months to track down exactly where his body was. It turns out that he was in a Pauper'S field. And the worst part about all of that, the fact that he was reported missing, he had been missing. They finally find out that he's deceased and they finally find where he is. They are then told that they are going to have to pay the fee of $250 to get his body. So now here we are in October of 2023, and Miss Betterston, along with a sheriff's deputy and 2 inmates in jumpsuits, and as well as her daughter, they all went to plot number 672, where Dexter was buried. I also want to mention that even though Dexter Wade was the son of Miss Betterston. He was also a brother, and he was the father of 2 little girls. Now, I have heard a couple of different stories as to what happened to Dexter Wade, but the one consistent story that I keep coming across is that an off-duty police officer hit him with his cruiser. Unfortunately, we may not know what happened to Dexter Wade, but nevertheless, the fact that you could report your child missing, nobody bothered to investigate, you find out that he is unalived by the hands of the police, and they knew who this family was simply because of what happened back in 2019 with Miss Betterston's brother. So the family was known. More importantly, is that when he was unalived, he had a photo ID, his address. He had all kinds of identification in his wallet, which was on him. And this was found by the coroner and was given to the police officer, apparently, when he was pronounced. But apparently this just went, I guess, unnoticed or covered up, however you want to say. And he still, it's my understanding, and I'll say allegedly because I'm not sure, but this is the story, is that he still had that same identification on him when his body was picked up. Now, if that's not trifling, I don't know what is. The unfortunate thing of all of this is Dexter Wade is not the only man that this has happened to. Now, since this incident happened with Dexter Wade, we are learning that in Mississippi there are a lot of, I'll say men, because this is all I've heard of. There's a lot of men who have gone missing and are unalive due to homicide or whatever the circumstances, and their families aren't made aware. This is the case of Mario Terrell Moore, 40 years old. I guess because of all of the tension that Dexter Wade's case was getting, police, I guess they decided that we need to let the public know that we have, like maybe 12 people who we haven't identified. And so I guess they put something out and described these unidentified men, allegedly, and the article of clothing that they were wearing. And this is when Marquita Moore recognized the article of clothing as being something that belonged to her brother who was missing. So she finds out that her brother is no longer with us. Now, this is terrible because let me just say this. It's hard knowing when you have lost a loved one and you know where they are and you know what happened to them. Can you imagine? Your loved one is missing. You do all of the things that you're supposed to do and that you are entitled to do when someone is missing. And you find out that he is buried in a grave where he has been for quite some time. So you learn this, and not only do you learn this, you find out that he was bludgeoned until he was unalived, wrapped up in a tarp, and left on the street. And he laid there in the morgue for months, unclaimed, until he was buried in a pauper's grave. Now, here's the thing. It seems to me, I'm no detective, but I'd like to think I can think like one. If someone reports someone missing, the first thing that I'm going to do is go to the morgue, contact the hospitals. And when I say this, I'm Speaking as a police officer, like I said, I would look to see if there's any Jane or John Does in the morgue. I would, check the hospitals and double check, the steps that the family probably took. That's what I would do as a detective. I would detect. Well, apparently this was not done. So here we are. This story has hit news outlets. It's made the news. It has gone on the internet. We now know that there are over 200 bodies known to the police found in unmarked graves behind a jail in Jackson, Mississippi. Well, there are people who still live in Mississippi and probably around the United States of America who think that this is something that doesn't happen. It's an isolated incident, or that black people are just complaining, calling foul, racism, because we have nothing better to do. Well, no. Let me introduce you to someone else. This here is Jonathan David Hankins. Now, Mr. Hankins was discovered unalived by authorities days after he went missing, which was on May the 23rd, 2022. He was found in a hotel room. So, needless to say, you figure authorities are called, his body is picked up, he is autopsied or whatever the procedure is, and that would make him, a John Doe as well. And still, he was reported missing in crickets. Now, it is believed that his unaliving was due to some substances he was using. And the thing about him is that the investigators were able to verify his identity with no problem. However, once again, just like the other cases, the Jackson Police Department did not inform his family, and the county inmates were made to bury Mr. Hankins alongside the others who had been buried. He was plot number 645. And this is terrible. After his mother, Gretchen, reported him missing, she contacted the police every few weeks to see if there was any news about his whereabouts, and she was told time and time and again that there was no new information. Here again, as a detective, I would detect and start checking the morgues, or I don't know. I don't know how big Jackson, Mississippi is, but I would think that there aren't that many John Does popping up at the morgue that would prevent police from just doing a quick cursory check, I guess you could say. I mean, I don't understand it. It is believed that authorities did not even bother to identify him. No, I take that back. They did identify him. It is believed that they did not bother to notify the family because they figured he was just another addict, gone. Now, this story right here is not hard to find. All you have to do is go to Google and put in over 200 bodies missing in Mississippi, inmates. It'll pop up. 215 to be exact is the count that we have thus far. And though this story has been publicized, it's not publicized enough. Like, how many people know the story? And more importantly, where else is this happening? Now, we happen to know about what has happened in Jackson, Mississippi. What's happening in California, New York, Virginia, Texas, Ohio? How often is this happening? And these aren't even men who were incarcerated or just in the jail for the weekend. These are men who were found unalived and just filed away in the morgue until they got buried. And here's the worst part about all of this, as if it could get any worse. These bodies are buried in shallow ground. I mean, they're not even, they don't even have the decency to put them in, the wooden boxes, the caskets. They are just leaving them in the body bags and throwing them in the ground. They're not even digging deep to the point where there is an odor and buzzards flying around. So if you're looking for your loved one and you've reported them missing and haven't heard anything, I know this is going to sound horrible, but follow the buzzards, because they seem to be doing a better job at pointing this out than what the police are. These were just men. I don't care if you were unalived through any means, by your own hand or someone else's. You don't deserve to be treated like this, to just dumped. And they don't even have the decency to even do that part right. They are just throwing them in there, doing the least amount of digging as they can and putting them in there, and that's that. Now, needless to say, Ben Crump is involved in this, and rightfully so. I can imagine that this is very traumatizing. You've done all the things that you're supposed to do. And as far as checking places, reporting to the police, all of those things you do, and you find out that your loved one has been in the morgue all this time, unidentified, and then eventually buried, and not even put in a pine box. They've been thrown in the ground just below surface, not even given the proper care. It's just awful. That's all I can say. And I don't know what I would do if this were me. I can remember, and I know oftentimes I mention how my cousin was unalived and her body was found. She was identified and she was buried. And I will have to give the police credit. They did their job. And one of these days on this platform, I'm going to go into her story, but they did not, she had a record. She had other issues, but the police did not let that stop them in finding out who she was and letting the family know. And she was in another state that we're not even from. We have no relatives in that state, but they went that extra mile. And the person who was convicted, they made sure they stayed in touch with us for years about her case. And I have to say that the fact that these men are just hidden away like they don't exist, and when people make a fuss about it, it's, there's black people complaining again. But we see that this is not only happening to black people, it's happening to, seems to be, anybody who I guess they would consider less desirable in Mississippi. Now, I know this video is getting a little longer than what I usually, like to make them, but I will probably follow up. Well, I actually already have, looking into other states to see how often this is done. And I got to say, just a little bit, and I've done a little research on it, just that little bit has shown me that Mississippi, it is just atrocious what is being done there. And I think that people need to start losing their jobs behind this. No one should have to walk around wondering what is going on with their loved one, where their loved one is. And the police know good and full well. They know who he is. In the case of Dexter Wade, they claimed that they called his mother one time and didn't get an answer. So I asked, does that mean you stop? You don't keep going until you get somebody or somebody in the family because they know who that family is. I can say this about everybody who I have talked about in this story. They knew who these men were. They just didn't care.
Unsettling situation in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi to be exact. It's been revealed 215 bodies were buried in unmarked graves behind a state jail in Jackson, of course. Attorney Ben Crump is now calling for an investigation. Families of the dead reportedly had no idea until last month. Some of them, those grave sites were only labeled by a number and a metal rod. Joining us to talk about it, activist Arthur Silky Slim Reed, who also works with Ben Crump.
So, Arthur, this started with Dexter Wade's case back in March, right? He was an individual who was hit by a police officer, and his family thought he was simply missing, but he was dead and buried, and no one notified them.
Well, the thing about it is that he had identification on him, Isaiah, and the medical examiner gave it to the lead detective who said he called, didn't get an answer, and they didn't worry about doing anything else. What we're finding, Isaiah, is that Mississippi is Mississippi. It's an ugly Mississippi. And this is sad because now we have 6 other individuals that has been put into the same grave. And if you look at the video from when we first went to that site, buzzards were flying overhead. And we were trying to figure out why are the buzzards flying overhead? But it's because they're putting them in shallow graves, and the only thing that they're putting them in is a body bag without embalming the bodies. So the stench from the bodies are drawing buzzards there. It's so inhumane for anybody to do anyone like that, Isaiah, is just horrible is what we can say. And that's not even a word that we should use in a situation like this. It's something that we haven't seen.
And what we're seeing here is over 200 people in this, what they consider a pauper's grave behind the county jail there. And what you guys are learning in your investigation is many of these families were never called, were never notified. Many of them still think their family members or thought their family members were simply missing, but they were dead and buried and never got a call from any investigators, any law enforcement officials or authorities in Jackson, Mississippi.
That's right. And one of the things that we faced being Mississippi is that they thought that we were playing the race card. We have white clients as well. There were white people that were buried the same way, Isaiah. And any human being that's buried the way that they're burying these individuals, it says a lot about the people that's doing this criminal act. And the only thing that we're asking, because people always look at us when we're out fighting for civil rights of individuals, the only thing that we're asking in this case, we want you to do the right thing and give them a humane burial. And the city is, so it's crazy, Isaiah, to see something like that. It's 2023. It's not 1940. But to see them just dumping bodies in a grave like that, and no name, just a number. So they'll say, well, number 13, that's Arthur Reed. Number 21 is Isaiah Carey. But we don't really know until we get the remains. And then the remains had decomposed so bad, we just have to take them at their word. And when you look at the story, they told us that they would exhume this body at 12 noon, but they ended up taking this young man, Dexter Wade, out of the ground at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. They say, we were not going to allow them to embarrass us with those cameras. If you're not embarrassed by what you're doing, it's shame on you.